Sometimes the most powerful moments in our lives come from the most unexpected places. When we're drowning in our own struggles, consumed by success that feels empty, or paralyzed by challenges we can't solve with money or power, salvation often arrives wearing an apron and carrying a gentle heart. This is the story of how one woman's simple act of kindness didn't just change a child's life. It transformed an entire family. The morning rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse, creating intricate patterns that danced across the marble floors. Marcus Whitmore stood in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders to his investment team in Tokyo. At 42, he had built an empire worth $3 billion, yet the weight of his success felt heavier than ever. His reflection in the window showed a man who looked older than his years, silver threading through his dark hair, lines etched deep around his eyes from countless sleepless nights and stress-filled days. "Sir, the merger documents need your signature by noon." His assistant Jennifer's voice crackled through the intercom, interrupting his call. Marcus glanced at his Rolex, already 10:30, and he hadn't even seen his son yet today. 8-year-old Daniel Whitmore sat in his bedroom 3 floors below, rocking back and forth on his bed, hands covering his ears as the sounds of the city filtered through the supposedly soundproof walls. The chaos of New York seemed to penetrate every barrier his father's money had tried to build. Daniel's autism made the world feel overwhelming most days, but today was worse. His nanny had quit yesterday, the 4th one this year, leaving him feeling more isolated than usual. Marcus had tried everything money could buy: the best doctors, the most expensive therapists, private tutors, specialized equipment. Yet Daniel remained locked in his own world, unable to connect with his father despite Marcus's desperate attempts. The boy would have meltdowns that lasted hours, wouldn't make eye contact, and seemed to retreat further into himself with each passing day. Marcus blamed himself, wondering if his constant work travel and emotional distance had somehow caused his son's condition, even though every doctor assured him that wasn't the case. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the penthouse, followed by Daniel's anguished screaming. Marcus dropped his phone mid-sentence and ran toward the noise, his heart pounding. He found Daniel in the kitchen, surrounded by shards of his favorite blue ceramic bowl, a gift from his late mother. The boy was having a complete meltdown, his small body convulsing with sobs as he frantically tried to piece the broken fragments back together, cutting his fingers in the process. "Daniel, stop. You're hurting yourself." Marcus reached for his son, but Daniel recoiled violently, his screaming intensifying. This was the part Marcus dreaded most, feeling completely helpless while watching his child suffer. Every attempt to comfort Daniel seemed to make things worse, creating a cycle of frustration and guilt that haunted Marcus day and night. Just then, Rosa Martinez appeared in the doorway. She had been working as the household's head housekeeper for only 2 weeks, referred by an agency after the previous staff had also quit due to Daniel's challenging behaviors. Rosa was a 50-year-old woman from Guatemala who had immigrated to the United States 15 years ago, working multiple cleaning jobs to support her own family while sending money back home to her elderly parents. What happened next would forever change Marcus's perspective on everything he thought he knew about care, compassion, and what it meant to truly help someone. Rosa didn't rush toward Daniel or try to grab him like everyone else did. Instead, she slowly lowered herself to sit on the kitchen floor, several feet away from the broken ceramic and the distressed child. She began humming a soft lullaby in Spanish, her voice barely above a whisper. The melody was simple but haunting, filled with the kind of warmth that seemed to emanate from deep within her soul. Marcus watched in amazement as Daniel's screaming gradually subsided. The boy's frantic movements slowed, and his wild eyes began to focus on Rosa's gentle face. She continued humming, occasionally adding soft Spanish words that sounded like poetry even though Marcus couldn't understand them. Rosa's own hands moved in slow, rhythmic patterns, not reaching for Daniel but creating a visual rhythm that seemed to match her melody. "Está bien, pequeño," Rosa whispered, her voice carrying decades of experience comforting frightened children. "Tu vas a estar bien." Even without speaking Spanish, Marcus could hear the love and patience in her tone, something he had never managed to achieve in his own voice when dealing with Daniel's episodes. Slowly, carefully, Rosa reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small piece of colored paper. With deliberate movements, she began folding it, her fingers working the creases with practiced precision. Daniel watched, mesmerized, as the paper transformed into a small bird. Rosa placed it on the floor between them, then pulled out another piece of paper and began the process again, this time making a flower. The transformation in Daniel was remarkable. His breathing steadied, his body relaxed, and, for the first time in months, he made direct eye contact with another person. Rosa smiled, a radiant expression that seemed to light up the entire room. She gestured toward the paper figures, then toward Daniel, inviting him to join her world of quiet creativity. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, witnessing something he had thought impossible. His son, who couldn't tolerate being touched and who seemed to live in constant distress, was actually smiling. Not just a brief flicker of happiness, but a genuine, sustained expression of joy and connection. "Would you like to try?" Rosa asked Daniel in accented but clear English, her voice maintaining that same gentle cadence she had used with her Spanish lullaby. She held out a fresh piece of paper, waiting patiently for Daniel's response. Daniel looked at the paper, then at Rosa's kind face, then back at the small collection of origami figures growing on the kitchen floor. Slowly, tentatively, he reached out and took the paper from her hands. It was the first time Marcus could remember his son voluntarily accepting anything from a stranger. Rosa began teaching Daniel the basic folds, her movements slow and clear, repeating each step until he understood. When Daniel made mistakes, she didn't correct him with frustration, but simply demonstrated again with infinite patience. When his fingers couldn't quite manage a difficult fold, she gently guided his hands without force, somehow knowing exactly how much contact he could tolerate. "My grandmother taught me this when I was very young," Rosa explained to Daniel as they worked. "She said that when we fold paper, we're taking something flat and making it beautiful, giving it new life. Just like how every day gives us a chance to be something new and wonderful." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. When was the last time he had cried? He couldn't remember. Watching Rosa work with Daniel was like witnessing a miracle. Here was this woman, paid minimum wage to clean his house, demonstrating more skill and intuition with his son than teams of expensive specialists had managed in years of treatment. As the morning progressed, Rosa continued working with Daniel while efficiently managing her other responsibilities. She cleaned the kitchen around them, seamlessly incorporating Daniel into her tasks. When she needed to wipe the counters, she asked Daniel to hold her supplies. When she organized the pantry, she had him count items and sort them by color. Everything became a gentle game, a way to engage his mind without overwhelming his senses. Marcus found himself canceling his meetings and, instead observing from a distance, learning more about his son in one morning than he had in the previous year. He watched Rosa's methods, trying to understand her approach. She never raised her voice, never showed frustration when Daniel needed extra time or repetition. She treated his autism not as a problem to be solved, but as simply another way of experiencing the world. When lunchtime arrived, Rosa faced another challenge. Daniel was notoriously difficult about food, refusing most meals and having intense reactions to certain textures and smells. The previous nannies had often resorted to forcing him to eat or bribing him with screen time, neither of which worked well, and both of which left Daniel more upset than before. Rosa approached this differently too. She invited Daniel to help her prepare his lunch, showing him each ingredient and letting him smell and touch everything before it went into his meal. She explained what she was doing in simple terms, describing how the colors of the vegetables were like the colors of his origami paper, how the shapes of the pasta were similar to the geometric patterns they had been creating. "Food is like art," she told him, arranging his lunch on the plate in a careful pattern that resembled a flower. "We can make it beautiful, and then it becomes even more delicious." Daniel not only ate his lunch without protest, but actually asked for seconds, something Marcus had never seen before. The child who usually fought every meal was now curious about food, engaged in the process of eating, and actually enjoying himself. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus realized he was witnessing something profound. Rosa wasn't just managing Daniel's behaviors or keeping him occupied. She was truly connecting with him, understanding his unique perspective, and finding ways to make the world feel safer and more manageable for him. She had accomplished in one day what Marcus had been struggling to achieve for years. The most remarkable moment came when Daniel hurt himself slightly while playing. Instead of the usual meltdown that accompanied any minor injury, Daniel walked directly to Rosa and showed her his scraped finger. She examined it carefully, cleaned it gently, and placed a small bandage decorated with cartoon animals over the scratch. Daniel watched the entire process with calm attention, trusting her completely. "Thank you, Rosa," Daniel said clearly, the first time Marcus could remember his son expressing gratitude to anyone other than family. As evening approached, and Rosa prepared to leave for the day, Marcus found himself panicking at the thought of her absence. How would he handle Daniel's evening routine without her calming presence? How would he manage bath time, dinner, and bedtime, all the daily challenges that had become sources of stress and conflict? "Excuse me," Marcus called to Rosa as she gathered her belongings. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Rosa nodded respectfully, following Marcus into his office. She looked small and somewhat nervous in the imposing room filled with awards, certificates, and expensive artwork. Marcus realized he had never actually had a real conversation with any of his household staff. They were simply part of the machinery that kept his life running smoothly. "What you did today," Marcus began, his voice thick with emotion he rarely allowed himself to express. "With Daniel. I've never seen anything like it. How did you know what to do?" Rosa smiled, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "I have experience with special children, sir. My own nephew has similar challenges. Also, I worked for many years with children before I came to housekeeping. Sometimes children just need someone to meet them where they are, instead of trying to force them to be somewhere else." Her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. How many times had he tried to force Daniel to be normal, to behave like other children, to fit into the world Marcus had designed rather than adapting that world to fit Daniel's needs? "I'd like to offer you a different position," Marcus said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. "Not just housekeeping. I want you to work with Daniel, to be his companion, his guide. I'll pay you whatever you ask. I'll give you benefits, vacation time, anything you need. I can't bear to see him struggle the way he has been. And you clearly have a gift." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, considering his offer carefully. "Mr. Whitmore," she said finally, "I'm honored by your trust. But I need you to understand something. Working with Daniel isn't just about having the right techniques or methods. It's about patience, consistency, and understanding that progress isn't always fast or obvious. Some days will be harder than others. Some weeks might feel like we're moving backward instead of forward." "I understand," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he really did. "Also," Rosa continued gently, "Daniel needs his father. Not just someone to take care of him, but his father to be present, to learn alongside him, to be part of his world. I can help, but I cannot replace that connection." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he got when business deals became complicated or when problems couldn't be solved with money alone. But looking at Rosa's honest, caring face, he realized this wasn't about finding a quick fix or buying his way out of a difficult situation. This was about fundamentally changing how he approached his relationship with his son. "Will you teach me?" he asked, the question coming out more vulnerable than he had intended. Rosa's smile broadened. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore. We'll learn together." As Rosa left that evening, Marcus found himself looking forward to the next day for the first time in months. Daniel had asked when Rosa would return, showing an awareness and anticipation about the future that was new for him. For the first time since his wife's death 3 years ago, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could build the kind of relationship with his son that he had always wanted but never knew how to create. That night, as Marcus tucked Daniel into bed, his son looked the next morning arrived with crisp autumn sunlight filtering through the penthouse windows. Marcus had barely slept, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. For the first time in years, he had canceled his morning conference calls, choosing instead to be present when Rosa arrived for work. He wanted to observe more of her methods, to understand how she had managed to reach Daniel in ways that had eluded everyone else. Daniel was already awake, sitting by his bedroom window, clutching the small paper bird Rosa had made for him the day before. When Marcus entered the room, his son looked up with an expression of eager anticipation rather than the usual anxiety that marked their morning interactions. "Is Rosa coming today, Daddy?" Daniel asked, his voice carrying a hopefulness that made Marcus's heart ache with both joy and regret. Joy for this new development, regret for all the mornings his son had woken up without anything to look forward to. "Yes, she'll be here soon," Marcus assured him, sitting carefully on the edge of Daniel's bed. "Would you like to show her the paper bird you kept safe all night?" Daniel nodded enthusiastically, carefully cradling the delicate origami figure. This simple interaction felt monumental to Marcus. His son was engaging in conversation, making eye contact, and showing excitement about connecting with another person. These were all things that had seemed impossible just 24 hours ago. When Rosa arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, she greeted Daniel with the same gentle warmth she had shown the previous day. But Marcus noticed something different in her approach today. She didn't immediately launch into activities or try to recreate yesterday's successes. Instead, she took time to observe Daniel's mood and energy level, reading the subtle signals that indicated how he was feeling and what kind of interaction he might be ready for. "Good morning, Daniel," she said softly, noticing how he held his paper bird. "I see you took good care of our friend from yesterday." Daniel beamed with pride, carefully showing Rosa how he had kept the bird safe on his nightstand. She examined it with the same attention and respect she might give to a priceless artifact, turning it gently in her hands and commenting on how well-preserved it was. "You know," Rosa said thoughtfully, "birds like this one need friends. Would you like to learn how to make a whole family of birds today?" As they settled into the living room area that Rosa had quietly transformed into a safe, organized workspace, Marcus positioned himself where he could observe without interfering. He had brought his laptop, intending to handle some urgent emails, but found himself completely absorbed in watching the dynamic between Rosa and his son. Rosa's approach was methodical but never rigid. She had brought a small bag of supplies, different colored papers, some textured materials, and a few simple tools, but she let Daniel explore these items at his own pace. When he became fixated on a particular color or texture, she didn't redirect him, but instead found ways to incorporate his interests into their activities. "My grandmother used to say that every color has a feeling," Rosa explained as Daniel sorted through the papers, organizing them by shade. "Red feels warm and excited, like a happy heart. Blue feels calm and peaceful, like a quiet lake. What do you think green feels like?" Daniel considered this seriously, holding up a piece of green paper to the light. "Like trees," he said finally. "Safe and tall and strong." "That's beautiful, Daniel. You have a poet's heart," Rosa responded. And Marcus was struck by how naturally she affirmed Daniel's unique perspective rather than correcting or questioning it. As they began working on their origami family, Rosa introduced new concepts gradually and always within Daniel's comfort zone. She taught him about symmetry by having him fold papers in half and observing how both sides matched. She explored counting by having him create multiple birds and organizing them into groups. She discussed storytelling by encouraging him to imagine what adventures his paper creatures might have. What impressed Marcus most was how Rosa handled challenges and setbacks. When Daniel became frustrated because his folds weren't as precise as Rosa's, she didn't offer false praise or try to minimize his concerns. Instead, she showed him her own early attempts at origami, sharing stories of her mistakes and failures when she was learning. "See this crooked fold?" she said, pointing to an imperfect crease in one of her practice pieces. "My grandmother always told me that the most beautiful things in nature are never perfectly straight. Trees grow in curves, rivers wind through valleys, and even our heartbeats have their own special rhythm. Your bird doesn't need to be exactly like mine to be wonderful." Daniel studied her words carefully, then looked at his own slightly lopsided creation with new appreciation. "It's still a bird," he said with satisfaction. "It can still fly in my imagination." "Exactly," Rosa agreed. "And imagination is the most powerful tool we have. As the morning progressed, Marcus began to see patterns in Rosa's methodology that he had missed the day before. She was constantly building Daniel's confidence while gently expanding his capabilities. Every success was celebrated, but she also helped him learn from difficulties without becoming overwhelmed. She created structure without rigidity, offered choices without creating anxiety, and maintained expectations that were challenging but achievable. Around mid-morning, Rosa suggested they take their activities outside to the penthouse's large terrace. Daniel had always been resistant to changes in location or routine, but Rosa framed the transition as an adventure for their paper birds. "I think our birds would like to see what it feels like to fly closer to the real sky," she suggested. "Should we take them on an expedition?" The terrace offered a spectacular view of Central Park and the Manhattan skyline, but Daniel had rarely spent time there due to his sensitivity to outdoor sounds and unpredictable elements. Rosa had anticipated this challenge, bringing along a soft blanket to define their space and some noise-canceling headphones that she placed nearby, but didn't insist Daniel use. She set up their workspace with the same care she had shown inside, creating a sense of order and predictability in the new environment. When a helicopter flew overhead and Daniel showed signs of becoming overwhelmed, Rosa immediately began humming one of her Spanish lullabies, drawing his attention back to their shared activity rather than the unexpected noise. "Sometimes the world feels very loud," she acknowledged, "but we can create our own quiet space right here, just the two of us and our bird family." Marcus watched from the doorway as his son, who had never been able to tolerate the terrace for more than a few minutes, spent the entire morning outdoors without any signs of distress. Rosa had somehow made the vast, overwhelming city feel manageable and safe for Daniel, transforming what had always been a source of anxiety into a place of creativity and calm. When Jennifer, his assistant, called to ask about the canceled meetings, Marcus found himself irritated by the interruption. For years, work had been his refuge from the difficulties of parenting Daniel. But now, watching his son thrive under Rosa's guidance, Marcus realized he had been using work to avoid confronting his own feelings of inadequacy as a father. "Reschedule everything until this afternoon," he told Jennifer, "and block out my mornings for the rest of the week. I have something more important to attend to." As Jennifer's surprised silence stretched across the phone line, Marcus felt a shift in his priorities that was both exciting and terrifying. He had built his entire identity around his business success, but watching Rosa with Daniel was showing him a different kind of achievement, one that couldn't be measured in profit margins or stock prices. After lunch, Rosa introduced a new element to their routine: practical life skills disguised as play. She had Daniel help her organize his art supplies, teaching him about categorization and responsibility while making it feel like a game. She showed him how to clean up their workspace together, turning what had always been a battle into a collaborative activity. "When we take care of our things, they take care of us," she explained as they put away the origami papers. "It's like we're being good friends to our belongings." Daniel embraced these concepts with enthusiasm, proud to be capable and helpful. Marcus realized that previous caregivers had either done everything for Daniel or had demanded independence without providing the scaffolding he needed to develop these skills gradually. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors: Marcus's sister Sarah and her 8-year-old daughter Emma, arriving for their weekly visit. Typically, these encounters were challenging for Daniel, who struggled with the disruption to his routine and the social demands of interacting with his cousin. Marcus usually dreaded these visits, knowing they would likely end with Daniel having a meltdown and Sarah leaving with barely concealed frustration about his son's behavior. But today, with Rosa present, everything was different. When Sarah and Emma arrived, Rosa quickly assessed the situation and made subtle adjustments to their activities. She expanded their origami station to accommodate the additional people, introduced Emma to the paper folding techniques, and created a natural bridge between the children that didn't require forced interaction. "Emma, would you like to help Daniel teach me how to make a butterfly?" Rosa suggested, positioning herself as the learner and the children as the teachers. This reverse dynamic gave Daniel confidence and purpose while providing Emma with a way to connect with her cousin without the usual pressure to accommodate his differences. Marcus watched in amazement as the children worked together, Daniel patiently showing Emma the techniques Rosa had taught him, Emma asking genuine questions about his methods, and admiring his creations. For the first time in their lives, the cousins were truly playing together rather than simply existing in the same space while trying to avoid conflict. Sarah pulled Marcus aside, her eyes wide with surprise. What happened to Daniel? He's like a completely different child. And who is that woman? She's incredible. Marcus explained about Rosa's arrival and the transformation he had witnessed over the past 2 days. As he spoke, he realized he was describing not just Daniel's changes, but his own growing awareness of what his son was capable of achieving with the right support. I've made so many mistakes, Sarah, Marcus admitted, voicing feelings he had carried for years. I kept trying to fix Daniel instead of understanding him. I threw money at the problem and hired experts and bought equipment, but I never just sat with him and tried to see the world through his eyes. Sarah, who had always been critical of what she perceived as Marcus's emotional distance from Daniel, was quiet for a long moment. It's not too late, she said finally. Look at him now. Look at how happy he is. You're learning, and that's what matters. As the afternoon progressed, Rosa continued to facilitate positive interactions while remaining nearly invisible in her guidance. She anticipated challenges before they arose, redirected energy when tensions began to build, and created opportunities for success that felt natural and unforced. When Emma had to leave, Daniel surprised everyone by initiating a goodbye hug, something he had never done before. He also carefully selected one of his paper birds to give to his cousin as a gift, explaining that it would help her remember their fun day together. After Sarah and Emma left, Marcus found himself alone with Rosa and Daniel for the first time since her arrival. The penthouse felt different now, warmer somehow, filled with the evidence of creativity and connection rather than the sterile perfection it had maintained for years. Rosa, Marcus said as they cleaned up the last of their supplies, I want to learn what you're doing. Not just so I can help Daniel, but so I can be the father he deserves. Rosa paused in her tidying, studying Marcus's face with the same careful attention she gave to Daniel's moods and needs. Mr. Whitmore, being the father Daniel deserves doesn't mean being perfect. It means being present, being patient, and being willing to learn about who he is rather than who you think he should be. That sounds harder than running a billion-dollar company, Marcus said with a rueful smile. In some ways it is, Rosa agreed. Business success often comes from controlling variables and minimizing risks. Parenting requires accepting uncertainty and embracing the fact that love doesn't always follow logical patterns. As evening approached and Rosa prepared to leave, 3 weeks had passed since Rosa began working with Daniel, and the transformation in the Whitmore household was nothing short of remarkable. Marcus had restructured his entire schedule, delegating more responsibilities to his management team and working from home most mornings. For a man who had once measured success by the number of hours spent in boardrooms and the volume of deals closed, this shift represented a fundamental change in his definition of what truly mattered. The penthouse itself had evolved along with its inhabitants. What had once been a showcase of expensive minimalism now bore the comfortable signs of actual living. Daniel's artwork decorated the refrigerator, origami creatures inhabited windowsills throughout the apartment, and the formal dining table had been converted into a permanent crafting station. Marcus had initially worried about the disorder, but he found the lived-in atmosphere infinitely more welcoming than the sterile perfection he had maintained for years. Daniel's progress had been steady and sometimes surprising. His vocabulary had expanded dramatically as Rosa engaged him in conversations that respected his intelligence while meeting him at his developmental level. His motor skills had improved through the precise work of paper folding and the various practical tasks Rosa incorporated into their daily routine. Most importantly, his emotional regulation had stabilized to a degree that amazed everyone who knew him. But it was the relationship between Marcus and Daniel that had undergone the most profound transformation. Under Rosa's gentle guidance, Marcus was learning to communicate with his son in ways that felt natural rather than forced. He discovered that Daniel responded better to calm, clear instructions than to the rapid-fire business tone Marcus typically used. He learned that his son needed processing time before responding to questions, and that silence wasn't something to be filled, but rather respected as part of Daniel's communication style. On this particular Thursday morning, Rosa arrived to find Marcus and Daniel already engaged in their new breakfast routine. Instead of the hurried, stressful mornings that had characterized their previous life, they now took time to prepare meals together. Daniel had become quite skilled at measuring ingredients and enjoyed the predictable patterns of cooking procedures. "Good morning, Rosa," Daniel called out cheerfully, looking up from where he was carefully counting blueberries into pancake batter. His greeting was spontaneous and warm, a stark contrast to the boy who had barely acknowledged other people just a month ago. "Good morning, my friend," Rosa replied, hanging her coat in the closet that Daniel had helped organize with color-coded hangers. "I see you and your father are creating something delicious." Marcus smiled, flour dusting his usually immaculate business shirt. "Daniel informed me that pancakes taste better when you count the blueberries as you add them. Apparently, the magic number is 47. 47 is an excellent number," Rosa agreed seriously, understanding that Daniel's need for specific quantities wasn't arbitrary, but provided him with the predictability and control that helped him feel secure. "Did you know that in some cultures, odd numbers are considered especially lucky?" Daniel's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? Why are they lucky?" As Rosa launched into an age-appropriate explanation about different cultural beliefs regarding numbers, Marcus marveled at her ability to transform every conversation into a learning opportunity. She never talked down to Daniel or dismissed his questions as unimportant. Instead, she treated his curiosity as valuable and worthy of detailed, respectful responses. After breakfast, they settled into their morning routine, which had become a carefully orchestrated balance of structure and flexibility. Rosa had learned to read Daniel's energy levels and adjust their activities accordingly. On high-energy days, they might work on complex origami projects or take expeditions around the penthouse to observe how different rooms served different functions. On quieter days, they might focus on reading, gentle music, or simple repetitive tasks that provided comfort without overwhelming stimulation. Today, Rosa had planned something special. She had been slowly introducing Daniel to the concept of community helpers and different types of work, and she had arranged for them to visit the building's maintenance facilities to meet some of the people who kept their home functioning smoothly. "Daniel," she said as they finished organizing their craft supplies, "would you like to meet some of the people who help take care of our building? They do important work that makes it possible for us to live here safely and comfortably." Marcus felt a flicker of concern. Daniel had never shown interest in meeting new people, and the maintenance areas of the building were unfamiliar territory that might trigger anxiety. But he had learned to trust Rosa's instincts, and her track record of successful innovations gave him confidence in her judgment. Daniel considered the proposal carefully, a habit Rosa had encouraged by always giving him time to process new ideas before expecting an answer. "Will you stay with me?" he asked. "Of course I'll stay with you," Rosa assured him. "And if you feel uncomfortable at any time, we can return upstairs immediately. This is an adventure, not an obligation." The distinction was important, Marcus realized. Rosa consistently framed new experiences as opportunities rather than requirements, giving Daniel agency over his participation and reducing the anxiety that came from feeling trapped in uncomfortable situations. Their first stop was the building's laundry facility, where they met Mrs. Chun, who had been washing and folding linens for the building's residents for over a decade. Rosa had clearly prepared for this encounter, having spoken with Mrs. Chun previously about Daniel's needs and interests. "Hello, Daniel," Mrs. Chun said warmly, her voice naturally soft and welcoming. "Rosa told me you're learning about different kinds of work. Would you like to see how I make sure everyone's clothes come back clean and fresh?" Mrs. Chin's approach was perfect for Daniel's learning style. She explained each step of the process clearly, demonstrated the procedures slowly, and invited Daniel to observe without pressure to participate. When she mentioned that Daniel asked if she could stay for dinner, the request was simple, but Marcus recognized it as another milestone. His son was advocating for himself, expressing his desires, and actively seeking to maintain positive connections. "I need to go home to my own family tonight," Rosa explained gently. "But I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we can plan something special for tomorrow's activities. What would you like to work on next? Daniel considered this seriously, then brightened with excitement. Can we make a paper garden? With flowers and butterflies and maybe a tiny house. That sounds like a wonderful project, Rosa agreed. We'll need to plan carefully and gather the right materials. Maybe your father can help us figure out what we'll need. Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest at being included in their planning. For years, he had been on the outside of Daniel's world, looking in and feeling helpless. Now he was being invited to participate, to contribute to his son's happiness in meaningful ways. That night, as Marcus helped Daniel get ready for bed, their evening routine felt different. Instead of the usual struggles over bath time, toothbrushing, and pajamas, Daniel was cooperative and engaged. He talked about the day's activities, shared his excitement about tomorrow's plans, and seemed genuinely content with his life in ways Marcus had never witnessed before. "Daddy," Daniel said as Marcus tucked him in, "I like Rosa very much." "I like her very much too," Marcus replied honestly. "She makes everything feel safer," Daniel observed with the profound insight that children sometimes possess. "Like the world isn't as scary when she's here." Marcus kissed his son's forehead, understanding exactly what Daniel meant. Rosa had indeed made the world feel safer, not just for Daniel, but for Marcus as well. She had shown them that challenges could be opportunities, that differences could be celebrated, and that connection was possible even when it seemed impossible. As Daniel drifted off to sleep, Marcus sat in the chair beside his bed, something he hadn't done in years. He found himself thinking about Rosa's words, about the difference between controlling variables and accepting uncertainty. His entire business philosophy was built on the first principle, but raising Daniel required embracing the second. For the first time since his wife's death, Marcus felt optimistic about the future, not because their challenges had disappeared, but because he was beginning to understand that the challenges themselves weren't the problem. The problem had been his approach to them, his assumption that every difficulty needed to be eliminated rather than navigated with patience and love. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to learn, to grow, and to build the relationship with Daniel that Marcus had always wanted but never known how to create. With Rosa's guidance, he was discovering that being a good father wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being willing to learn them together with his son, one origami fold at a time. Ed up at him with those same bright eyes that had watched Rosa so intently throughout the day. "Daddy," Daniel said softly, "Rosa is nice." "Yes," Marcus agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "She is very nice." "Will she come back tomorrow?" "Yes, she will." Daniel smiled. That same genuine expression of happiness Marcus had witnessed for the first time that morning. "Good," the boy said, closing his eyes contentedly. As Marcus watched his son drift off to sleep, he realized that Rosa had given them something more valuable than all his billions combined: hope. The hope that Daniel could thrive, that they could connect, and that love sometimes arrives in the most unexpected packages. The rain had stopped, and moonlight streamed through Daniel's bedroom window, illuminating his peaceful face. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like maybe they were going to be okay. Eileen's destiny, and reminded a wealthy man what it truly means to be rich.